Have you ever received a phone call from a complete stranger that changed your whole life? My call came a month ago. It was a gorgeous Saturday morning in early May. The sun was shining, the birds were singing. As spring arrived, my to-do list became longer than my arm. My workday got a little more complicated when my wife, Becky, was forced to volunteer for a marathon. The insurance agency she worked for was sponsoring a 3K race the following weekend, and it took all of her strength to help with the huge amount of details that needed to be finalized. Our twin daughters, Megan and Tammy, occupied themselves on our deck while I worked on the backyard part of the list. I promised the girls a McDonald's if they played nice while I mowed the lawn. I filled up the petrol, checked the oil, and was ready to start mowing when my mobile phone rang. I didn't recognize the number and put it to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again, but the caller didn't leave a message. I was interested in their persistence, and when the phone rang a third time, I answered with a friendly, "Hello?" The answer nearly knocked me off my feet. "Mr. Richards, you don't know me, but your wife is going to have an affair with my husband this coming weekend." "What?" I demanded. "Whoever it is, it's not funny." I hung up, but a few seconds later, the phone rang again. "Listen, lady," I said, "I don't know who the hell you are, but stop ringing." "My name is Daniel Campbell. You can call me Danny. Your wife's name is Rebecca Richards. She's shopping for a new dress and lingerie for her date next Saturday night. My husband Randolph has made reservations for dinner and dancing at the Pump Room restaurant. He has also booked them a suite where they can consummate their illicit affair. I know this because they're being watched." As I listened in stunned silence, my mind screamed, "No, no, 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 that's a lie!" My husband is, to put it in a fancy word, a bore. He finds amusement in seducing and then dumping beautiful married women. Randolph knows that I know, so he's been very careful to cover his tracks. It wasn't easy, but now I work for Guaranteed Insurance. Karen is a recluse who blends into the background but sees and hears everything. She keeps me informed of his actions on a daily basis. Karen has been watching my husband groom your wife as his next conqueror. Yes, Mr. Richards, that means he has yet to have sexual relations with Rebecca. I suspect your wife has made up a story about volunteering for a marathon sponsored by her employer. In reality, the agency's involvement boils down to handing over a sizable check and the owners posing for publicity photos at the finish line. Oh, and there are no fees today. She's shopping at Nordstrom's as we speak. You, sir, are being played as I am. However, I intend to prevent it, with or without your help." My hands trembled with rage. I took a deep breath and snorted. "Tell me what I can do." I think a little history will help you understand why I was so depressed by these accusations. I met Becky when I was 7 years old. After my sister was born, my mom announced that we had outgrown our house in the city and were moving to a new house in the suburbs the following week. Before unloading the van, Becky came up to us, introduced herself to me, and announced that she was going to marry me. I replied, "Okay." We spat into each other's palms and shook hands to make it official. All that was left was to grow up until we were old enough to make it legal. True to our word, from that day forward, we were an inseparable couple. I fought more times than I can count when my friends teased me for liking girls. That all changed when we moved on to high school, where our friends were constantly on a merry-go-round of who was dating who hated who because they broke up with another friend. We looked past these mere players in the game of love because we knew we would be together forever. We both went to community college, and on graduation day, I formally proposed to her. The first crack in our armor came when our twin daughters went into first grade. Becky took a part-time job at a local insurance agency. The hours were great. She would put our girls on the big yellow bus, drive to work, and come home to meet them in the afternoon. In her second week on the job, one of the agents received an award for the highest score in the region. This was cause for celebration after work. Becky was invited to join her colleagues at the bar, where a happy hour was being held that included 2-for-1 drinks and complimentary appetizers. She made a quick phone call. Her grandmother was more than happy to babysit her little ones. Curiously, there seemed to be some sort of celebration every month. But being a veteran of more than one weekend cocktail party, I didn't deny her the opportunity for some adult socializing. Somewhere around the third month, I noticed that Becky started dressing better for work. What started out as a simple blouse or jumper and trousers turned into a skirt or dress, complete with tights and even heels. "I'm interacting more with clients and need to look good," is how she explained it. One Friday, I decided to surprise my wife by sneaking out of work a little early to attend their ritual. I got there around 4:45. The bar was full. It took a few minutes of elbowing my way through the crowd before I saw Becky. She had a plate of wings in one hand and a glass of vodka in the other. When she saw me, she rushed to find a place to put them so she could wrap her arms around my neck and kiss me. She was thrilled to want to show me off. It was nice to meet people I had heard of. However, two stood out, and not for good reasons. One of them was Eva Lewis. Her long hair and clothes were black, giving her a dark, almost sinister look. Becky had said she preferred to be called Ava Lewis, and judging by the gossip in the office and her own boasting, she tried to live up to that nickname. The second bad feeling came from her immediate supervisor, Randolph Campbell. I called him Randy. He corrected me. He may have worn a wedding ring, but his demeanor suggested he was single. This man was a great insurance salesman because he was always on the phone, and what he was selling was himself. I noticed that when I spoke, he would ignore me and focus on my wife. I also noticed that he often touched the women when he talked to them, but never the men. I mentioned this to Becky that evening, but she claimed she hadn't noticed anything. She also assured me that I had nothing to worry about. No man would ever come between us. Little did I realize that Eval had already planted the seeds of infidelity in her mind. Every Monday she would tell my innocent wife about her weekend conquests, the men who could sleep for hours on end, and how they expressed their gratitude. This went on for weeks until she mentioned that she and Campbell had been lovers for the past 5 years, and that he was the best man in her life. Evil was an erosion, and Becky was a stumbling block. But one only has to look at the Grand Canyon to realize that the Colorado River won in the end. My wife, who had never been in the whore business, had nothing to add to the conversation. Becky naively heeded every word until she began to believe the tales of immoral romance and adventure. Eval had become Becky's self-appointed guide on the road to debauchery. Hearing that she might be susceptible, Campbell invited Becky to lunch to talk about her future in the company. He placed his hand on her nylon-clad knee as soon as she sat down at the table. Becky foolishly allowed him to keep his hand on hers. After that, Campbell started patting her arse when no one was looking. Becky never objected. On Friday nights, he gallantly offered to walk her to her car. What started with a friendly peck on the cheek quickly escalated to a full onslaught of tongue on Becky's mouth. Soon he was groping her like a sophomore behind the bleachers. In retrospect, I should have wondered why Becky was always in the mood for lovemaking when she returned home after a holiday with her colleagues. But what married man would want to risk ruining the moment when his beautiful wife comes home and treats him like a newlywed on their honeymoon? I loved my wife and our family and would never do anything to jeopardize them. Too bad my self-proclaimed partner for life no longer felt the same way. The wall has been reached. Barring a miracle, on Saturday my wife will no longer leave everyone else behind. Her body would be desecrated. Fortunately, I had an ally who planned our defense like a chess master. Now, earlier in the week, Danny had taken the liberty of setting up an appointment for me with her lawyer. Nothing gets the attention of a deadbeat spouse like getting a petition for dissolution of marriage. The only time I hired a lawyer was when I bought a house, so I had no idea what it would cost. I cried as I pulled out the metal box I'd hidden in the workshop. I was going to use the money to surprise my family with a trip to Disney. Now, unlocking the lock, I felt dead. Inside was every last cent I'd managed to put away by skipping lunches, getting haircuts at hairdressing college, and just being cheap. I counted out $521.66, mostly singles and fives. I'd have to go to the bank because I'd look too pathetic dumping my shattered dreams on his desk. The first step was complete. Barring a miracle, step 2 will be done in 3 days. That way, you'll know what happened. It was another beautiful Saturday morning, the perfect day for a marathon. Before leaving for town, Becky dressed our twin daughters in their Daisy Girl Scout uniforms and apologized again for missing Discovery Day. She kissed both of them and promised to bring them something from town. Becky was dressed in shorts and a guaranteed insurance t-shirt. While she showered, I checked the boot of her car and found an overnight bag and a new red cocktail dress still wrapped in polythene. I was tempted to throw her clothes in the dumpster and fill it with store-bought rags, but I remembered Danny's words, "Delaying the inevitable is not winning. They need to be caught, humiliated, and punished so it doesn't happen again." I had to agree that she was right. As I closed the boot, I had only one thought. How could a mother look at the sad eyes of her innocent daughters and then fail their big day to have an affair with her boss? Right up until Becky left, I prayed that she would change her mind and come with us to the scouting event because nothing is more important than her family. My prayers were not answered. Instead, she nonchalantly said, "It's going to be a long day today. Karen from the actuarial department has invited us girls to spend the night at her flat in town. Sounds like fun. You won't mind if I go, will you?" I almost lost control of myself. I was this close to hitting my wife. She gave me her silly grin and said, "I'll make it up to you tomorrow." I clenched my fists, bit my tongue, and then nodded my head. The future of my marriage now depended on Danny Campbell. In a few hours, I would find out if her careful planning would have time to save my marriage. The devil had found fertile ground in my mind as I wondered if I even wanted to stay married to her. Switch off your brain, stop thinking. I felt like a real rat, informing the girls that plans had changed and we were going downtown. They were very upset about the lack of scouts until I told them I would take them on a horse-drawn carriage ride down Michigan Avenue. I also promised a big surprise. Before we got to the hotel, Danny had already managed to get an extra key card for her husband's room. This wasn't too difficult as her driver's license and American Express Platinum card confirmed that she was Mrs. Randolph Campbell of Lake Forest, Illinois. She also asked a trusted friend, Janet, to take the keys to a nearby room that had been booked online. This would be our staging area. Janet stayed close by and helped keep an eye on the kids until they took center stage. After making sure they were off for a stroll down Michigan Avenue, no doubt in search of the perfect pair of shoes to match their new bright red dress, Danny snuck into the room. She scouted out the room with the bed and hid the nanny cam so we could be sure to catch them right before the act. When we entered the room, we were greeted by two young girls, Tyler and Michelle. Megan and Tammy immediately befriended them and started playing with them like old friends. Danny then introduced me to Deputy Scott, the man who would serve the unfaithful with the divorce papers. He had been chosen for both his discretion and his intimidating size. He was at least 6 feet 6 inches tall and looked like solid muscle. He stood up straight, and his expression didn't change as he nodded his head. In his left hand, he held 2 manila envelopes. They contained the opening salvo of the Third World War. We watched a video of the two traitors returning from lunch. I saw that the bed was undisturbed and took that as a good sign. But things were about to change when they enclosed each other in a loving embrace. I started cursing under my breath. "Mr. Richards, be patient. If you can still find redemption today, I will find nothing but the end of a long, torturous journey." When we were convinced that the act had to take place, we told the children that we were going to surprise Dad and Mom. Timing was crucial, as we didn't want the girls to see them naked. Thankfully, they closed the bedroom door behind them. I put my index finger to my lips and told the children that they had to be very quiet. They smiled conspiratorially as we stepped out into the corridor. Danny opened the door and the kids snuck into the outer room. Deputy Scott followed them and I lurched up behind them. Danny counted down the time on her fingers and swung the door open. The kids came running in with a piercing scream that only 4 young girls are capable of. The flash on my camera created a strobe effect in the room, adding to the confusion. Becky was lying in bed, her blouse unbuttoned and her skirt pulled up. I could see that she was wearing nylon panties and garters. Campbell stood with his trousers buttoned while Deputy Scott handed him the divorce papers. I captured the stupid look on his face in at least 6 pictures. The man didn't understand a thing. Becky was white as death as all 4 children jumped onto the double bed. Her mouth was open, but she didn't utter a word as she too was served. One of the girls hit her with a pillow. She didn't react. When Danny's friend took the children to another room in the suite, a brief scuffle ensued. Campbell took advantage of the distraction and took a swing at me. I was lucky and he missed. Deputy Scott missed. A stream of blood spurted from Campbell's nose and he collapsed to the floor. Seeing that the bastard still had an erection, I kicked him hard in the balls. It felt good, so I kicked him again. And with Danny's help, 2 or 3 times in the ribs. My wife sat motionless on the bed, pulling the sheets up to hide her embarrassment. She didn't utter a word as I stomped on her almost lover. Now get dressed so I don't have to explain to our daughters that their mother is a slut. Campbell's body was still twitching on the floor when the deputy handcuffed him and announced that he was under arrest for assault and battery. Becky then uttered the classic cheating wife line, "I can't believe this is happening to me." "Happening to you! It's happening to you!" I screamed. "It's not happening to you. It's happening to 4 little children who will never again go to bed with a mother and father married to each other. This is happening to an innocent wife. It's happening to me. It's happening because you put yourself first. You've destroyed 2 families. You and that piece of shit." I kicked him again. Becky looked catatonic. She wasn't crying, but she was breathing like an asthmatic struggling for air. I noticed her lips were trembling before she passed out. No one tried to catch her, and she fell heavily to the floor. Deputy Scott called an ambulance to pick up his captive. Danny gathered her daughters and told them the room was paid for if I wanted to stay and talk. I managed a weak laugh. The 4 daughters swore eternal friendship, and my 2 began making plans to visit Danny's girls and their underground pool. Danny hugged me and whispered in my ear, "Remember, forgiveness is divine." I told Megan and Tammy to go to the other room to watch TV. Both said they were starving, so I let them eat whatever they wanted from the minibar. Yeah, and soda pop, too. Tears came to my eyes as I sat down on the floor next to Becky and ran my fingers through her hair. For a long time, we both didn't say anything. Out of habit, I pulled her body to mine and squeezed as hard as I could. I was still in pain. "I wish I had died yesterday to spare you all the pain I caused," she started sobbing. "I don't know what to do." She lifted the envelope from the manila and struggled to open the metal clasp. The papers slipped out onto the floor. "Where do I go?" she groaned. "My life is over," I mumbled. Becky hung her head and said, "I can't look at you. I'm so ashamed of what I did." She buried her face in her hands. "I'm not just saying this because I got caught, but I'm sorry, really sorry. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I ruined us. I had everything. My life was perfect. And I ruined us. I destroyed our family. How will I ever be able to look our daughters in the eye again? Why was I so stupid?" She began to sob again. Megan and Tammy walked in with a Hershey's bar smeared on their lips. Megan, the older of the twins by 15 minutes, was always the official spokesperson for the duo. "Is Mummy okay?" "Honey, Daddy and Mummy need a little time to talk. Give Mummy a kiss and then go watch TV." Just when things seemed at their bleakest, I looked at my wife's face and started laughing. Becky looked embarrassed. "Let me help you up. I have something to show you." There was a perfect chocolate kiss on each cheek, impervious to tears. I turned her to face the mirror. Becky started to giggle. I put my arm around my wife and realized that we would make it through this ordeal. Yes, it would be a long time before I could trust her, and it would always hurt from her betrayal, but I was sure that together we would prevail. Epilogue. Danny's lawyer was a pit bull. On Monday, sheriff's deputies served the owners of the insurance agency, as well as the president of Transglobal Life, the company issuing the policies, with papers for alienation of affection, ignoring violations of the company's fraternization policy, and a dozen other bizarre legal theories. He also sued the catalyst, Eva L. herself, for conspiracy to commit adultery. By the end of the day, the agency was no longer affiliated with Transglobal, and their lawyers scheduled a meeting with ours to propose a significant settlement. Eva was fired on the spot. Campbell was fired while he was still in the hospital recovering from the amputation of 2 ruptured testicles. It was chilling. I wish I'd been there to see it. Everyone else lived happily ever after.